I work the graveyard shift at a local shipping warehouse. Most of my job is counting inventory, making sure all shipments and items are accounted for and are tracked through the whole organizing process. Every once in a while, I'll have a coworker on the same shift as me, but usually, it's just me. This night was no different than any other. I got to the warehouse and checked in with my manager, who locked up the place and left me to it. I started doing my typical routine, checking all the shipments that came in during the day. As I did, and about an hour into my shift, I passed by a door that I noticed was cracked open, like it was closed, but just not latched into the doorway, so it was sticking out a little bit. This specific door was on the back of the building, usually where truckers would enter from. I opened it and looked out, seeing an empty and quiet lot outside behind the warehouse. Nothing really to see at all. I figured my manager must have just forgotten to lock it. I didn't have the key to any of these sort of side access doors, so I couldn't lock it or anything. But honestly, I didn't really care. It just wasn't a big deal. At least, not for me. I shut it behind me and went back to counting inventory. I was working pretty quick, getting through a decent amount and making it to the next aisle of shelves, when just from the corner of my eye, it looked like something moved at the far end of the hallway. I immediately looked up, but nothing was there. What it looked like, again, from the side of my vision, was someone running across the opening of the hallway back there. I thought it had to be some weird trick my mind was playing on me, but it still got my heart pumping for a moment. I shook my head and rubbed my eyes, wondering what was up with me. I debated whether or not to check on it, but initially I decided not to, just because it would slow down my workflow to walk all the way down there, and because I was 99% sure it was nothing. Things like this happen all the time. Thinking you see something in the corner of your eye, and every other time it ends up being nothing. So why would this be any different? But as the minutes passed, I couldn't shake the small feeling that it could have been someone. I sighed, somewhat disappointed in myself for being so unnerved by this, and walked down to the end of the hallway. This section I never really go to, because it has nothing to do with my job. It's just a bunch of shelves full of large pallets already prepped to be shipped out of the warehouse. Because I don't work in there, most of the lights were off. I just stood in the hallway and looked into the large, dark room for a few seconds, waiting to see if I saw anything move, but nothing did. I left the hallway and went back to work in the same spot I was before. I don't know if it was because of that small situation, but it felt like I just got hit by a wave of exhaustion. Suddenly, I was tired, and not wanting to work as quickly as I was just a few minutes before all this happened. I wanted to finish this aisle before taking my break though, so I kept working. But not even 5 minutes passed before I suddenly noticed something in the side of my vision again. I jolted my eyes toward the end of the hallway. I swear, it looked like a figure, or someone was leaning out from behind the corner, like they were watching me. But now, nothing was there. This time I immediately dropped what I was doing and hurried to the end of the hallway. Again, it was dark, and I really didn't see anything at all. I called out, not really expecting any response, but figured it was worth a try. "Hello?" I waited a few seconds, then walked further into the room. It was so quiet. Every step I took echoed all the way through the warehouse. I stopped about halfway through and looked around. As I stood there, I felt an incredibly disturbing and unsettling feeling of being watched, and not being able to see anything only made it worse. I hurried back to where I came from, making it to the other end of the hallway before I glanced back one more time. The darkness in that room gave me chills. I started to walk away, to go back to work, when a sudden extremely loud thud rang through the warehouse. It was metallic, like someone banging metal against one of the large shelving units. Afterward, there were a few seconds of silence, only filled by the faint echoes lingering through the room, before there was another thud, quieter this time, like a repeated tapping against the metal shelf. It was like they were trying to get my attention, to lure me back into the dark room. But knowing this had to be a person now, and being completely horrified, I ran away. This happened a couple of weeks ago. I worked the night shift at Walmart, It's not the worst job in the world, but after a while, it starts to feel like you're just floating through time. The nights blend together. Same shelves, same routine, same dull hum of the overhead lights. Hopefully something better comes along. I usually hang out in and stock the electronics section, which is nice because it's quieter than the other areas. People don't exactly come rushing in at 2 a.m. to buy phone chargers and Bluetooth speakers. Most of the customers are either night owls killing time or truckers grabbing last-minute supplies before heading back on the road. That's why I noticed him. At first, I didn't think much of it. Just another guy wandering the aisles, probably waiting for someone. But after a few minutes, I realized he wasn't shopping. He wasn't even pretending to. He just kept appearing. Every time I glanced up, he was lingering nearby, hovering in the next aisle over or standing a little too still by the clearance section. He wasn't looking at anything. He was just standing there, watching me. I told myself I was overthinking it. The store's big, and maybe he was just taking his time. But the way he moved, always just close enough for me to notice, never actually picking anything up, it set something deep in my gut on edge. I was waiting for him to just get on with it and ask for my number, but he never approached me. It was like he wanted me to see him, which didn't make any sense to me. I went to radio someone about it, but realized the batteries in my radio must have been dead because it wasn't working. Eventually, I started debating whether I should go find a manager when I felt a hand wrap around my arm. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but before I could react, a woman's voice rang out, loud, friendly, overly familiar. She exclaimed, "There you are," before going on a little spiel about how she had been looking all over for me. I turned, completely thrown off, and saw a woman I had never seen before in my life. She was smiling, her grip firm on my arm like we were old friends reuniting. Before I could say anything, she leaned in and whispered, her tone dropping to something low and urgent. "That guy's been recording you. Follow me." My stomach dropped. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance back. The man was still there. Only now, he wasn't even pretending to browse. He was staring right at me. A cold wave of fear crept over me. I let her pull me. I didn't even question it. The way she grabbed my arm, the way she spoke so loud and casually, like we were two old friends reuniting, I clung to it. I was beyond grateful that someone had realized what was going on and put herself in an uncomfortable position just to help me. She kept up the act as we walked, rambling about something. Maybe a trip she had taken, maybe an inside joke we supposedly shared. I barely processed the words. My thoughts were stuck on him. Had he really been recording me? That was creepy as hell. I wanted to know if he was still following us, but I couldn't muster the courage to turn around. Not yet. The woman steered me through the aisles, moving fast. I barely noticed where we were going, only that we were going, that the distance between me and that man was growing. In all honesty, I was kind of expecting her to quit pretending she knew me at some point. But she kept it up. At one point, it was getting a little uncomfortable, so I glanced behind me, and to my relief, that man was no longer following. The woman kept pulling me forward, though. I told her that we were good now, that we should probably go find my manager. But she just squeezed my arm tighter, telling me that he was lurking somewhere. I thought to myself, so what? What's he going to do in a store full of employees? I was obviously worried at first because no one was around, but now that I wasn't alone, I started realizing there wasn't much point in being scared anymore. I told her this, but she continued moving. I told her I was serious and planted my feet, twisting my arm slightly to loosen her grip. "You can let go now," I said. But she didn't. She smiled at me, but something in it was off. "Come on, just a little further," she said, basically tugging me at that point. I glanced around. The store was basically dead. We had moved past the registers, past the self-checkout, past the aisles that saw the most foot traffic. The warehouse section loomed ahead, dimly lit and nearly empty. Beyond that was the side exit, the one without cameras, the one employees used for loading shipments. That's when it dawned on me. She was leading me straight to the exit. I didn't think. I screamed for help as I yanked my arm free with all my might. She lost her grip just enough for me to pull away. I didn't waste another second. I turned and ran toward the front of the store. As I fled, she yelled out something behind me. She yelled for me to come back, followed by my name, which I hadn't given her. I kept running until I saw one of my coworkers, who was running toward me, most likely reacting to my screaming. I told them to call security, which they promptly did. That woman was long gone, though. By the time I told my story to the security guards, she and the man were nowhere in sight. They reviewed the security footage, and just as I suspected, the woman and the man walked into the store together. She had been with him the entire time. The man's face was clear as day in one of the frames, but hers was always turned away. I had a feeling she was the mastermind behind the whole thing, so I was infuriated that the cameras hadn't picked her face up. Every second of it had been planned. The police got involved, and the whole thing went down as a failed abduction attempt. I'm still waiting for a resolution. That man should definitely be easy to track down, given that his face was caught on camera. I have no idea how that woman knew my name. That's what terrifies me the most. Those people hadn't just picked me at random. I was a direct target. Back in 2013, I had to go out and find an internship to be able to progress in my education, but at the time it proved to be almost impossible to get one. So while I was looking, I decided to take another job, just to make sure we had food on the table. I found out a friend of my fiance's family had his own handicap bus company, a kind of taxi service for wheelchair users or otherwise disabled people, and he needed someone to cover the night shift, since it was a bus that had to be on call at least 22 hours a day. Seeing that I'm quite the night owl, I immediately told him I'd be happy to take the job, and after I got the needed license, I was hired. The job was pretty basic: pick up people and drop them off where they needed to go, and sometimes use a machine to get wheelchairs up or down some stairs. And when there were no trips, I drove to a designated area and did whatever while waiting. I quickly found a truck stop in the area where I could park and catch some Z's while waiting. There was a gas station where I would buy coffee in the early hours of the shift, and on the other side of the gas station's parking lot, on the opposite side of the truck stop, there was a rundown restaurant with a motel connected to it. To not disturb the sleeping truckers if I got a trip in the middle of the night, I usually parked in the restaurant side. After parking there every night for a while, I noticed one particular room had a lot of people come and go. In the beginning, I thought nothing of it. But then one night at the end of the summer, while I was half asleep with the windows slightly open, I suddenly heard yelling coming from the motel, and a dude came tumbling out of the room and started running. A few seconds later, a big dude came running after him with something in his hand. I could not make out what it was. I thought that it was none of my business, and I went back to my half-sleeping waiting stage. Not much time passed and my phone went off. I had a trip an hour's drive away. So I turned on the bus and was leaving the parking lot when I saw the big guy coming around the corner. The rest of the night I had back-to-back trips. I didn't get a return to home zone until 2 or 3 a.m. When I arrived at the parking lot, the area where I used to park had fist-sized rocks strewn all over the place. Not connecting the dots at the time, I just parked a few spots over and started waiting. I fell asleep pretty fast, but I was jerked back into reality when a car right in front of my bus honked its horn, flashed the high beams, and revved its engine. I thought it was just some idiot who noticed me sleeping and found it funny, trying to make me myself. So I jumped out of the bus to tell him to fuck off. But instead of driving off or stopping, the driver made this start-brake thing with the car, indicating that I was the one who should fuck off. And then I connected the dots. Not wanting to seem like a pushover, I stood still and stared at the car. Not that I could actually see anything with the high beams almost blinding me. And after what seemed like a really long time, but must not have been more than 30 seconds, the car drove off. After that, I decided to park near the trucks from then on. A month or so passed and nothing had happened since the car episode, and I figured that nothing more would if I just kept parking by the trucks. Then one night I had a long 12-hour shift on a Sunday, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and I didn't have time to eat dinner before work that day. And during the first half of my shift, I had back-to-back trips with no time to eat. So when I got a return to home zone, I quickly parked in the far end of the almost empty truck stop and got ready to eat my now very late dinner that my fiancée packed for me. I wanted to watch some TV on my phone while eating, so I sat with my back against the driver's side door and got comfy. While turning my back to the door, I accidentally hit the door lock with my elbow. But that was my luck. As I was sitting there scrolling Netflix on my phone, I heard the clack of the door handle behind me smacked back in position. I quickly turned and saw a dude with a hood over his head quickly crouching and proceeding to lay down on the ground and crawling under the bus, with a big-ass kitchen knife in his right hand. I quickly got up and made sure the other two doors were locked, and then I looked in all directions to see if I could still spot them. He was still under the bus, and I was sure as hell not jumping out this time, since the knife made his intentions pretty clear. I turned on the engine, turned on the spots in the back of the bus, and looked around to see if it scared him off. And lucky for me, it did. I saw him run off and into a bushy, woody area at the end of the truck stop. I never parked at that truck stop again after that night. I made sure all the doors were locked every time I was parked.